The moment Emily Carter hit send on that email, her entire world shattered. One photograph. One mistake. One billionaire who would either destroy her completely or change everything she thought she knew about survival, power, and what happens when a woman with nothing left to lose accidentally crashes into the most dangerous man in New York City. This is the story of how a single moment of chaos became the beginning of something neither of them could control. So stick around until the end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The thing about New York City at 3 in the morning is that it doesn't care if you're falling apart. Emily Carter learned this truth every night as she sat hunched over her laptop in the kitchen of her shoebox apartment in Washington Heights. The glow of the screen casting shadows across bills she couldn't pay and a life she could barely hold together. Tonight was worse than usual. Her laptop, a 6-year-old Dell that sounded like it was dying every time she opened more than 3 tabs, kept freezing on the quarterly report she needed to finish before sunrise. The heater in her building had been broken for 2 weeks. She wore 3 layers of clothing and still couldn't stop shivering. Emily was 30 years old, and she felt ancient. She worked as an executive assistant at Hayes Global, one of the most powerful investment firms in Manhattan. The job paid barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and the money she sent home every month to help her younger brother finish college in Ohio. Jake was the smart one, the one with potential, the one who still had a chance. Emily was just trying not to drown. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "Did you send the money yet? Tuition deadline is Friday." She stared at the message, her chest tightening. The money was sitting in her account. Barely. If she sent it to Jake, she'd have $43 left until her next paycheck in 10 days. $43 in New York City might as well be nothing. She closed her eyes, rubbed her temples, and went back to the report. The quarterly analysis was due to Alexander Hayes himself, founder, CEO, and the kind of man whose name appeared in Forbes articles with words like ruthless and untouchable attached to it. Emily had worked at Hayes Global for 2 years and had spoken to Alexander Hayes exactly 4 times, each interaction lasting less than 30 seconds. He didn't notice people like her. People who rode the subway and ate ramen and wore the same 3 professional outfits on rotation because that's all they could afford. Men like Alexander Hayes existed in a different atmosphere entirely. Emily pulled up the email draft she'd been working on, attached the quarterly report file, and typed a quick message. "Mr. Hayes, please find the Q3 analysis attached. Let me know if you need any revisions. Emily Carter." Professional. Polite. Invisible. She hit send and immediately reached for her coffee, cold now and bitter, but her elbow knocked the mug sideways, sending lukewarm liquid splashing across the table and dangerously close to her laptop. Shit! She grabbed a dish towel and frantically wiped down the table, her heart racing. The laptop was the only thing standing between her and total disaster. If it died, she couldn't afford to replace it. It took her 5 minutes to clean up the mess, and by the time she sat back down, her phone was buzzing again. Not Jake this time. It was a notification from her email. Delivery failed. Attachment size exceeds limit. Emily blinked at the screen, confused. The quarterly report was a standard PDF. It shouldn't have triggered a size error. She opened her sent folder and clicked on the email she'd just sent to Alexander Hayes. Her stomach dropped. The attachment wasn't the quarterly report. It was a photograph. A photograph of her. A very private photograph. The kind of photograph that was supposed to be locked away in a folder on her phone that no one would ever see. The kind of photograph she'd taken months ago during a rare moment of feeling good about herself. A moment of rebellion against the poverty and exhaustion that defined her life. She'd been alone in her apartment wearing black lingerie she'd bought on clearance, hair down, the lighting soft and golden. She'd felt beautiful for the first time in years, so she'd taken the photo and saved it, just for herself. A reminder that she was still a person underneath all the struggle. And now that photograph was in Alexander Hayes' inbox. No, 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 no! Emily's hand shook as she frantically tried to recall the email, but the system wouldn't let her. It had already been delivered. Panic slammed into her like a freight train. She'd just sent her billionaire boss a half-naked photograph of herself at 3 in the morning. Her career was over. Her life was over. Everything she'd worked for, every sacrifice she'd made, gone because of one stupid, impossible mistake. She couldn't breathe. Her vision blurred. She stood up too fast and knocked her chair backward, the crash echoing in the tiny apartment. She paced the kitchen, her mind racing through every terrible possibility. He'd fire her immediately. He'd humiliate her. He'd make sure she never worked in corporate New York again. Worse, he'd think she'd done it on purpose. He'd think she was some desperate woman trying to seduce her way into his world. The thought made her nauseous. Emily grabbed her phone and stared at Alexander Hayes' contact information, her thumb hovering over the call button. What would she even say? "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hayes. I didn't mean to send you a photo of myself half naked. It was an accident. Please don't destroy my entire life." She couldn't do it. She couldn't call him. She couldn't face this. Instead, she sat down on the cold kitchen floor, pulled her knees to her chest, and let herself fall apart. Across the city, in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking Central Park, Alexander Hayes sat in his home office reviewing acquisition documents that would close a $2 billion deal by the end of the week. He didn't sleep much. Sleep required letting his guard down, and Alexander Hayes hadn't let his guard down in over 5 years. Not since the night his wife died and left him alone with a 3-year-old daughter and a company that would collapse if he showed even a moment of weakness. So he worked. Always. His daughter Sophie was asleep down the hall. The nanny he employed had left hours ago. The penthouse was silent except for the faint hum of the city below. His phone chimed. An email notification. He glanced at the screen. Emily Carter. Q3. Analysis. Alexander didn't recognize the name immediately, but the subject line indicated it was work-related. He opened the email, expecting a standard report. Instead, he found himself staring at a photograph. A woman, dark hair falling past bare shoulders, soft lighting, black lace, eyes that looked directly into the camera with something vulnerable and defiant all at once. Alexander's first instinct was to delete it. Spam. A phishing attempt. Someone trying to compromise his security. But then he noticed the sender's name again, Emily Carter. He pulled up his employee directory and ran a search. Emily Carter, Executive Assistant, Corporate Strategy Division. 2 years with the company. Performance reviews? Excellent. No disciplinary issues. He looked at the photograph again. This wasn't spam. This was a mistake. Alexander had built his empire on reading people, on identifying weaknesses and opportunities in a single glance. He recognized panic when he saw it, and this email reeked of it. He should delete it, pretend it never happened, let HR handle the situation quietly. But he didn't delete it. Instead, he studied the photograph. The woman in the image didn't look like the polished professionals who filled the halls of Hayes Global. She looked real, tired, human. There was something raw in her expression, something that didn't match the carefully controlled world Alexander had built around himself. He didn't know why, but he saved the email. Then he closed his laptop and sat in the silence of his penthouse, trying to ignore the fact that for the first time in years, something had cracked through the walls he'd spent so long constructing. Mike. Emily didn't sleep. She sat on her kitchen floor until the sun started to rise, her mind replaying every worst-case scenario on an endless loop. By the time her alarm went off at 6:30, she'd made a decision. She wasn't going to work. She couldn't face him. Couldn't walk into that building knowing what she'd done. She'd call in sick, buy herself a day to figure out what to do next. Maybe she'd just quit, disappear, move back to Ohio, and start over. But even as she thought it, she knew it wasn't an option. She needed this job. Jake needed her to keep this job. So at 7:30, Emily forced herself into the shower. She put on her most conservative dress, navy blue, high neckline, nothing that could be misinterpreted. She pulled her hair back into a tight bun. She looked like she was going to a funeral. Maybe she was. The subway ride to Midtown felt like a death march. Every person who glanced at her felt like an accusation. By the time she stepped into the lobby of Hayes Global's headquarters, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely swipe her ID badge. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor took forever. When the doors opened, Emily walked toward her desk on autopilot, praying she could make it through the day without seeing Alexander Hayes. She lasted exactly 12 minutes. "Ms. Carter," the voice came from behind her, low, controlled, unmistakable. Emily's blood turned to ice. She turned slowly. Alexander Hayes stood 3 feet away, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent. He was taller than she remembered. Mid-30s, dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes that missed nothing. He looked at her the way a predator looks at prey. "My office," he said. "Now." It wasn't a request. Emily's legs felt like they might give out, but she nodded and followed him down the hall, past rows of cubicles where her coworkers pretended not to stare. Alexander's office was on the corner of the building, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, the kind of space that announced power without needing to say a word. He closed the door behind them. Emily stood in the center of the room, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Alexander walked to his desk but didn't sit. He leaned against it, arms crossed, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. The silence stretched. Finally, Emily couldn't take it anymore. "Mr. Hayes, I'm so sorry. It was an accident. I didn't mean—" "I know." She stopped mid-sentence, blinking at him. "What?" "I know it was an accident," Alexander said, his voice calm. Too calm. "You meant to send the quarterly report. You attached the wrong file." Emily felt her face burn. Yes. I don't know how it happened. I must have clicked the wrong—" "It doesn't matter how it happened." Alexander's gaze didn't waver. "What matters is what happens next." Emily's stomach twisted. Here it came, the firing, the humiliation. But Alexander didn't continue right away. Instead, he reached for his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then set it face down on the desk. "I deleted the email," he said quietly. "No one else saw it. No one else will." Emily stared at him, not understanding. "You're not going to fire me?" Something flickered across Alexander's face, something that almost looked like surprise. "Why would I fire you?" Because of what I sent you. You made a mistake." His tone was matter-of-fact. "You're human. It happens." Emily felt like the floor was tilting beneath her. This didn't make sense. Men like Alexander Hayes didn't show mercy. They didn't let things go. "I don't understand," she whispered. Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that made Emily's entire world tilt sideways. "The woman in that photograph," he said slowly, carefully. "She looked like someone who's been carrying the weight of the world for a long time." Emily's breath caught. Alexander's eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd walked into his office, she saw something other than control in his expression. "I know what that looks like," he continued, his voice softer now, "because I see it in the mirror every morning." The words hung in the air between them. Emily didn't know what to say, didn't know what any of this meant. Alexander straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place. "Go back to your desk, Ms. Carter. We'll pretend this never happened." It should have been a relief. It should have been the best possible outcome. But as Emily turned to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something neither of them could take back. She reached for the door handle. "Ms. Carter." She stopped, looking back at him. Alexander's expression was unreadable again, but his voice carried a weight she couldn't ignore. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you have nothing to be ashamed of." Emily's throat tightened. She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak, and walked out of his office. She made it back to her desk, sat down, and stared at her computer screen without seeing anything. Her career wasn't over, but something else had started, something dangerous. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily kept her head down, focused on her work, and tried to ignore the fact that every time she glanced up, she could see Alexander's office across the floor. He didn't call her again, didn't send any follow-up emails. It was as if their conversation had never happened. But Emily couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her, the way he'd spoken. She looked like someone who's been carrying the weight of the world for a long time. How had he seen that? How had he known? By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, Emily was exhausted, physically, emotionally, mentally. She packed up her things and headed for the elevator, desperate to get home and collapse. The elevator was crowded with other employees leaving for the day. Emily squeezed into the back corner and kept her eyes on the floor numbers as they descended. 28th floor, 25th, 22nd. The doors opened and more people filed in. And then just before the doors closed, Alexander Hayes stepped inside. Emily's entire body went rigid. He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her presence. He stood near the front of the elevator, his attention on his phone, completely professional. But Emily was acutely aware of him, the way he filled the space, the way everyone else in the elevator seemed to shrink back slightly, giving him room. The elevator descended in silence. 15th floor, 10th, 5th. Finally, the doors opened to the lobby, and people began filing out. Emily waited until the crowd thinned, then moved toward the exit. As she stepped past Alexander, he spoke, so quietly that only she could hear. "You're stronger than you think you are." Emily froze, her heart stuttering. But by the time she turned around, Alexander was already walking away, disappearing into the Manhattan evening without a backward glance. Emily stood in the lobby, surrounded by strangers, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. Wickik. That night, Emily sent the money to Jake. She ate ramen for dinner and tried not to think about the $43 left in her checking account. But for the first time in months, she didn't feel quite so alone. Across the city, Alexander Hayes stood in his daughter's bedroom, watching Sophie sleep. She was 7 now, smart, stubborn, beautiful. She looked like her mother. Alexander had loved his wife, had built a life with her, and when she died, suddenly, violently, in a car accident that still haunted his nightmares, he'd locked every piece of himself away to survive. For 5 years, he'd been a machine. Cold, efficient, untouchable. Until tonight. Until a photograph of a woman he barely knew reminded him that he was still capable of feeling something other than emptiness. He closed Sophie's door quietly and walked to his home office. The email was still deleted. The photograph was gone, but the memory of it wasn't. Alexander sat at his desk and stared out at the glittering skyline of Manhattan, wondering what the hell he was doing. And somewhere in the city below, Emily Carter lay awake in her tiny apartment, replaying 5 words over and over in her mind. "You're stronger than you think." Neither of them knew it yet, but the photograph had changed everything, and there was no going back. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange, unspoken tension. Emily went to work every day, did her job, and tried to pretend that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Alexander started noticing her, not in an obvious way, not in a way that anyone else would see, but Emily felt it. She'd be working at her desk, and she'd glance up to find him watching her from across the floor. Their eyes would meet for half a second before he looked away, and Emily's pulse would race. In meetings, he'd ask her opinion on things that had nothing to do with her job description. He'd listen to her answers with a focus that made her skin prickle. Once, in the break room, they'd both reached for the same coffee pot. Their hands had brushed just barely, and Alexander had pulled back like he'd been burned. "Sorry," he'd muttered. "It's fine," Emily had whispered. They'd stood there for 5 endless seconds, the air between them crackling with something neither of them could name. Then Alexander had walked away without taking any coffee at all. Emily told herself it didn't mean anything. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she replayed those moments over and over. Goal. The breaking point came on a Friday. Hayes Global was hosting a charity gala, one of those black tie events where billionaires wrote checks and pretended to care about causes they'd never personally experienced. Emily wasn't supposed to attend. Executive assistants didn't get invitations to galas. But 2 days before the event, Alexander's personal assistant quit without warning, and suddenly Emily was being pulled into emergency planning meetings and tasked with managing logistics she had no experience handling. "You'll need to be there," Alexander's chief of staff told her, "in case anything goes wrong." So Emily found herself standing in her apartment on Friday evening, staring at the only formal dress she owned, a simple black number she'd bought at a thrift store 3 years ago for a wedding. It would have to do. She did her makeup carefully, styled her hair, and took the subway to the Plaza Hotel feeling like an imposter. The gala was already in full swing when she arrived. Crystal chandeliers, string quartets, women in designer gowns, and men in tuxedos that cost more than Emily's annual salary. She slipped in through a side entrance and found a spot near the back of the ballroom where she could monitor everything without being noticed. For an hour, nothing went wrong. And then Emily saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing alone near the dessert table, looking lost. Emily recognized her immediately from the photographs on Alexander's desk. Sophie Hayes. Without thinking, Emily crossed the ballroom and knelt down beside the girl. "Hey," she said softly, "are you okay?" Sophie looked at her with wide, uncertain eyes. "I can't find my dad." Emily's heart squeezed. "Your dad's here. I can help you find him. What's your name?" "Sophie." "I'm Emily. It's nice to meet you, Sophie." The little girl relaxed slightly. "You're pretty." Emily smiled despite herself. "Thank you. So are you." "My nanny was supposed to stay with me, but she had to leave because her mom got sick, and now I don't know where my dad is, and there's too many people, and I don't like it here." The words tumbled out in a rush, and Emily could see the panic building in Sophie's expression. "Hey, it's okay," Emily said gently. "We'll find him together, but first, have you tried the chocolate cake? It's really good." Sophie blinked. "I'm not supposed to have sugar before bed." "Well, this is a special occasion," Emily said conspiratorially. "And I won't tell if you don't." A small smile tugged at Sophie's lips. Emily grabbed 2 plates, and they sat together at an empty table in the corner, eating cake, while Emily distracted Sophie with stories about growing up in Ohio. She was mid-sentence when a shadow fell across the table. Emily looked up. Alexander Hayes stood there, still in his tuxedo, his expression unreadable. "Sophie," he said quietly, "I've been looking everywhere for you." Sophie jumped up. "Daddy, Emily helped me. She gave me cake." Alexander's gaze shifted to Emily, and something complicated moved through his eyes. "Thank you," he said. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper. "Of course," Emily said, standing up. She was worried. You stayed with her." Alexander's voice was soft. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." Sophie tugged on Alexander's sleeve. "Can Emily come have dinner with us sometime, please?" Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sophie, please, Daddy? She's nice." Emily started to protest, to give Alexander an out, but he spoke before she could. "We'll see," he said carefully. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Sophie beamed. Alexander looked at Emily again, and this time she saw something raw in his expression, something that looked almost like fear. "Ms. Carter," he said formally, "could I speak with you for a moment?" Emily's heart jumped. "Of course." Alexander told Sophie to wait with one of the event staff, then led Emily out of the ballroom and into a quiet corridor. The noise of the gala faded behind them. They stood facing each other in the dim hallway, and Emily could feel the weight of everything unspoken pressing down between them. "I need to be honest with you," Alexander said finally. Emily's pulse hammered. "Okay." "Since that night, since the email, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." The confession hit Emily like a physical blow. "Mr. Hayes? Alexander." His voice was rough. "When it's just us, call me Alexander." Emily's breath caught. "I don't understand what's happening," she whispered. "Neither do I." He ran a hand through his hair, a crack in his usual composure. "I've spent 5 years shutting everyone out, building walls, keeping myself—" He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "Safe." From what? From feeling anything. He looked at her, and Emily saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the loneliness. "My wife died 5 years ago. Car accident. 1 minute she was here, and the next—" His voice broke slightly. "I had Sophie to take care of, a company to run. I couldn't afford to fall apart, so I didn't. I just stopped feeling." Emily's chest ached. "And then you sent me that photograph," Alexander continued. "And I saw someone who was struggling just as hard as I was, someone who was trying to survive. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt something." "What did you feel?" Emily asked, barely breathing. Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Everything," he said quietly. The word hung between them. Emily knew she should step back, should remind him that she worked for him, that this was impossible, that people like her didn't belong in his world. But she didn't move. "I don't know what to do with this," Alexander admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice was almost unbearable. "I don't know how to—" "Neither do I," Emily whispered. They stood there in the hallway, 2 people who'd spent too long carrying impossible weight, and for one fragile moment neither of them felt quite so alone. Then Sophie's voice echoed from the ballroom. "Daddy, where are you?" The spell broke. Alexander stepped back. his professional mask sliding back into place. "I should go," he said. "Yeah." But he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he looked at Emily one more time and said, "Be careful, Emily. People in my world, they destroy things. I don't want you to get hurt." "I'm already hurt," Emily said honestly. "I've been hurt for a long time." Something pained crossed Alexander's face. "Then I definitely shouldn't make it worse." He turned and walked back toward the ballroom, leaving Emily alone in the corridor with her heart racing and her entire world tilting on its axis. She knew she should run, should quit her job and disappear before whatever this was could destroy her. But as she watched Alexander return to his daughter, she realized something terrifying. She didn't want to run. For the first time in years, Emily Carter wanted to fight, and she had no idea if she was strong enough to survive what came next. Back. That night, Emily went home to her tiny apartment and sat on her kitchen floor again. But this time, she wasn't falling apart. She was thinking. Across the city, Alexander Hayes stood in his penthouse office, staring at the skyline and wondering what the hell he'd just done. He'd opened a door he'd sworn to keep closed forever, and he had no idea how to shut it again. Sophie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy? Why aren't you sleeping?" Alexander turned, forcing a smile. "Just thinking, sweetheart." "About Emily?" His chest tightened. "What makes you say that?" "Because you smiled when you were talking to her." Sophie padded into the room and climbed into his lap. "You don't smile a lot anymore." Alexander held his daughter close, his throat tight. "I used to smile more," he said quietly. "Before your mom." "I know." Sophie hugged him. "But maybe it's okay to smile again sometimes?" Alexander closed his eyes. Maybe she was right. Or maybe he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Either way, it was too late to turn back now. The photograph had changed everything, and neither Alexander Hayes nor Emily Carter would ever be the same again. Monday morning arrived with rain hammering against Emily's window, and the kind of gray sky that made New York feel like it was closing in on itself. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alexander's face in that hallway, heard his voice saying her name like it meant something. "Be careful, Emily. People in my world, they destroy things." She should have been terrified. Should have spent the weekend updating her resume and planning her escape. Instead, she'd spent Saturday helping Jake study for his midterms over FaceTime and Sunday cleaning her apartment until her hands were raw, trying not to think about the way Alexander had looked at her when he said he felt everything. Now it was Monday, and she had to face him again. Emily dressed in her usual armor, gray slacks, white blouse, hair pulled back tight, and took the subway to Midtown with her stomach in knots. The Hayes Global building looked the same as always, glass and steel and money. But when Emily stepped off the elevator onto the 32nd floor, the atmosphere felt different. People were whispering. Emily caught fragments of conversation as she walked to her desk. "Did you hear about Jenkins? Fired him over the weekend? Hayes doesn't mess around." She sat down and opened her email, trying to focus. 12 new messages, most of them routine. One from HR about updated security protocols, and one from Alexander Hayes sent at 6:15 that morning. "Ms. Carter, please see me at 9 a.m. A.H." Emily's pulse kicked up. She glanced at the clock. 8:43. 17 minutes. She tried to work, but the words on her screen blurred together. At 8:58, she gave up, grabbed a notepad she didn't need, and walked to Alexander's office. His assistant, a sharp woman named Patricia, who'd been with Hayes Global since the beginning, looked up as Emily approached. "He's expecting you," Patricia said, her expression unreadable. "Go ahead." Emily knocked once on the heavy door. "Come in?" Alexander was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the rain-soaked city. He didn't turn when Emily entered. "Close the door," he said quietly. Emily did, her heart hammering. The silence stretched. Rain tapped against the glass. Finally, Alexander turned to face her. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. "I need to apologize," he said. Emily blinked. "For what?" "For Friday night." He moved toward his desk but didn't sit. "I put you in an impossible position. I was—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "Unprofessional. It won't happen again." The words should have been a relief. A return to normal. Boundaries reestablished. But they felt like a door slamming shut. Okay, Emily said carefully. Alexander's jaw tightened. That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration cracking through his composure. I've been thinking about this all weekend, and I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do here. Emily's throat felt tight. You're supposed to forget it happened, like you said we would. I can't. The confession hung in the air between them. Alexander, I know. He cut her off, his voice rough. I know all the reasons why this is a terrible idea. I know you work for me. I know there's a power imbalance. I know people would talk. I know... He stopped, his expression raw. I know I could hurt you. And that's the last thing I want. Emily's chest ached. Then why are we having this conversation? Because Sophie asked about you 17 times this weekend. His voice cracked slightly. She wanted to know if you were coming to dinner. She wanted to know if you liked horses because she's learning to ride and she wants to show you. She wanted... He stopped, closing his eyes. She hasn't connected with anyone like that since her mother died. Emily felt something break open inside her chest. And me? Alexander continued, opening his eyes to look at her directly. I haven't felt like a human being in 5 years. And then you walked into my life by accident, and now I can't stop. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Emily knew what he meant, because she felt it too, the pull, the impossibility, the dangerous hope. What do you want from me? She whispered. Alexander looked at her for a long moment, and Emily saw the war happening behind his eyes. I want to take you to dinner, he said finally. As myself, not as your boss, just as someone who wants to know you. That's not possible. I know. People will find out. Probably. I could lose my job. You won't. His voice was firm. I'll make sure of it. Emily shook her head. You can't promise that. If people think I'm sleeping with you to get ahead, then they're idiots who don't know you at all. The fierceness in his voice caught her off guard. Alexander stepped closer, and Emily's breath hitched. I'm not asking you to risk everything, he said quietly. I'm just asking for one dinner, one conversation, a chance to figure out if this is... He stopped, searching for words. If this is real, or if I've just been alone for so long that I'm imagining things. Emily wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself from the inevitable crash. But when she looked at Alexander, really looked at him, she didn't see the ruthless billionaire from the Forbes articles. She saw a man who was just as scared and lost as she was. One dinner, she heard herself say. Something like relief flooded Alexander's expression. Friday night, he said. I'll send a car for you. No cars. Emily's voice was firm. I'll meet you somewhere. Alexander studied her, then nodded. There's a small Italian place in the village. Lucia's. Do you know it? No. 7 o'clock? Emily knew this was a mistake. Knew she was stepping off a cliff with no idea what waited at the bottom, but she nodded anyway. 7 o'clock? Alexander's shoulders relaxed slightly, and for just a moment he looked young, hopeful. Then his professional mask slid back into place. Thank you, Ms. Carter. That will be all. The dismissal was clinical, perfect. But as Emily turned to leave, she heard him speak one more time, so quietly she almost missed it. Emily. She stopped, looking back. I won't let anyone hurt you, he said. I promise. Emily wanted to believe him, but promises were expensive things in New York City, and she'd learned a long time ago that wanting something didn't make it real. She walked out of his office without responding, her heart racing and her hands shaking. Patricia looked up as Emily passed, her expression knowing. Careful, the older woman said softly. Emily met her eyes. Of what? Men like Alexander Hayes don't know how to do things halfway, Patricia said. Once he decides he wants something, he doesn't stop until he gets it. And if you're not ready for that kind of intensity... I'm not, Emily said honestly. Patricia's expression softened. Then maybe you should run while you still can. Emily thought about it all the way back to her desk. She thought about it through 3 meetings and 24 emails. She thought about it on the subway ride home, watching her reflection in the dark window. But she didn't run. The week crawled by like something wounded. Emily threw herself into work, trying to ignore the way her pulse jumped every time she saw Alexander across the office. They didn't speak again, didn't acknowledge each other beyond the bare minimum required by professionalism. But Emily felt his attention on her constantly. Wednesday afternoon, a delivery arrived at her desk. A small box wrapped in brown paper with no return address. Emily opened it carefully. Inside was a book. Used, the spine cracked, pages soft with age. The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Junot Diaz. A yellow post-it note was stuck to the cover. Sophie told me you mentioned this was your favorite. She wanted you to have a copy. 8. Emily's throat tightened. She'd mentioned it in passing on Friday night, while eating cake with Sophie. A throwaway comment about growing up and finding herself in Oscar's struggle between worlds. Alexander had remembered. Emily held the book for a long time, running her fingers over the worn cover. Then she tucked it into her bag and tried not to cry. Thursday morning, Emily's coworker Michelle cornered her in the break room. "Okay, what's going on?" Emily poured coffee she didn't want. "What do you mean? Hayes has been weird all week." Michelle lowered her voice. "Like, weirder than usual. Patricia said he snapped at someone in executive leadership for the first time in 3 years. And people are saying he turned down a meeting with the mayor because of a scheduling conflict that doesn't exist." So Alexander Hayes doesn't snap at people, and he definitely doesn't turn down political connections. Michelle studied Emily carefully. "And I've seen him watching you." Emily's heart stopped. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Michelle's expression was skeptical. "Because I've worked here for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you in the quarterly meeting yesterday." "He barely acknowledged me in that meeting." "Exactly." Michelle leaned closer. "He barely acknowledged you. Alexander Hayes acknowledges everyone. It's part of his thing. But with you, it's like he's actively trying not to look, which means which means nothing." Emily cut her off. There's nothing." "I didn't say there was." Michelle's voice was gentle now. "But Emily, be careful. I like you. You're good at your job and you're a good person. And men like Hayes, they live in a different world. If you get tangled up with him and it goes bad—" "It's not like that," Emily said firmly. But her hands were shaking. Michelle sighed. "Okay, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm fine." Emily wasn't fine, but she was getting really good at pretending. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth and the kind of clear sky that made Manhattan look almost beautiful. Emily left work at 5:30, went home, and stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, trying to figure out what you wore to dinner with a billionaire who wasn't supposed to be anything more than your boss. She settled on a dark green dress she'd bought on sale 2 years ago and never worn. Simple, understated. Nothing that would draw attention. She left her hair down this time, though. A small rebellion. Lucia's was tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner in the West Village, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Emily arrived at 6:58, her stomach in knots. Alexander was already there, sitting at a corner table near the back. He'd traded his usual suit for dark jeans and a gray sweater that made him look younger, more human. He stood when he saw her. "You came," he said, and there was genuine surprise in his voice. "You thought I wouldn't?" "I thought you'd come to your senses." Emily sat down, and Alexander followed. The table was small, intimate. Their knees almost touched underneath. "I still might," Emily said. A ghost of a smile crossed Alexander's face. "Fair enough." A waiter appeared, took their drink orders, and disappeared. Silence settled between them, awkward now that they were here, outside the structure of Hayes Global, with no professional scripts to follow. Alexander spoke first. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Do what?" "This. Date. Talk to someone without an agenda." He looked down at his hands. Since my wife died, I haven't even tried." Emily's chest ached. "You don't have to." "I want to." He met her eyes. "I want to know you, who you are when you're not trying to survive, what you dream about, what makes you laugh." "I don't dream much anymore," Emily said honestly, "and I can't remember the last time I really laughed." Alexander's expression grew pained. "Then we're a pretty pathetic pair." Yeah, Emily said, we really are. And somehow, impossibly, they both smiled. The waiter returned with wine. They ordered food neither of them would remember later. And slowly, carefully, they started talking. Alexander told her about Sophie, about how terrified he'd been when his wife died, and he'd suddenly been responsible for a 3-year-old while running a company that would have collapsed if he'd shown any weakness. I hired 5 nannies in the first year, he said. Sophie hated all of them. She'd scream every time I left for work. I thought I was destroying her. But you didn't, Emily said softly. No, but I didn't save her either. I just survived. We both did. He took a drink of wine. And then last Friday I watched her laugh with you, and I realized she hasn't laughed like that in years. Not with me. Not with anyone. Emily's throat felt tight. She's a good kid. She is. Alexander paused. She asked me this morning if you were going to be her new mom. Emily nearly choked on her wine. What did you tell her? That it doesn't work that way. Alexander's voice was quiet. But she didn't understand. She just knows she likes you. And in her 7-year-old logic, people who like each other should be family. That must have been a fun conversation. It was terrifying, Alexander said honestly, because part of me wanted to tell her yes. The confession sat between them like something fragile. Emily looked down at her plate. Alexander, we barely know each other. I know. And I can't be what you need. What Sophie needs. She stopped, struggling for words. I'm nobody. I live in a 500-square-foot apartment in Washington Heights. I eat ramen 3 nights a week because it's all I can afford. I send half my paycheck to my brother so he can finish college because I dropped out to take care of our mom when she got sick. I don't belong in your world. Good, Alexander said firmly. Because my world is full of people who've never struggled for anything in their lives. People who think money solves everything. People who... He stopped, his jaw tight. People who destroyed the woman I loved because she was an easy target. Emily went very still. What do you mean? Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his expression dark. My wife, Catherine, she came from money, old money, the kind that comes with expectations and obligations and social circles that eat people alive. His voice was hollow. We met in college. She was kind, real, everything those circles weren't. And for a while we were happy. What happened? I built Hayes Global. Alexander's hands tightened around his wine glass. And when the company started getting serious attention, Catherine's family decided she'd married beneath her, that I was using her for connections, that she should leave me. Emily's chest hurt. But she didn't. No, she stayed. She fought for us. And they made her life hell for it. Alexander's voice cracked slightly. Rumors, social exclusion, quiet cruelty disguised as concern. She tried to hide how much it hurt, but I saw it destroying her. Alexander, the night she died, we'd been fighting, he continued, staring at nothing, about whether we should move away, start over somewhere her family couldn't reach us. She wanted to stay, said she wouldn't let them win. I said we were both drowning and Sophie deserved better. His voice broke. She left angry, drove to her sister's house to cool off. A drunk driver ran a red light on Park Avenue. Alexander closed his eyes. She died before the ambulance arrived. Emily reached across the table without thinking and took his hand. Alexander's fingers closed around hers like he was drowning. I spent 5 years blaming myself, he whispered. If I hadn't pushed her, if I'd just let it go, if I'd been stronger, it wasn't your fault. I know that now, logically. He opened his eyes, and they were full of old pain. But knowing something and feeling it are different things. They sat in silence, hands clasped across the table, 2 broken people trying to figure out if they could build something from the pieces. Finally, Emily spoke. My mom died when I was 23, she said quietly. Breast cancer. Stage 4 by the time they caught it. We couldn't afford the treatment she needed, so I dropped out of school and worked 3 jobs trying to save her. Alexander's hand tightened around hers. It wasn't enough, Emily continued. Nothing was enough. She died 6 months later, and I was left with $60,000 in medical debt and a little brother who still had 2 years of high school left. Emily, I declared bankruptcy, moved us from Ohio to New York because I thought I could make more money here. Spent 7 years climbing out of the hole we'd fallen into. She looked at Alexander, letting him see all of it. So when you say I'm stronger than I think, you're wrong. I know exactly how strong I am, because I've had to be. Alexander stared at her, something like awe in his expression. You're extraordinary, he said softly. I'm broke and exhausted and one emergency away from losing everything again, Emily corrected. I'm not the kind of person who belongs at charity galas or in penthouses overlooking Central Park. Maybe that's exactly why you belong there, Alexander said. Because you know what it costs. What people are actually fighting for when they're just trying to survive. Emily pulled her hand back, needing distance. This won't work, she said. You know it won't. Probably not. People will talk. They'll say I'm using you. Let them. They'll make my life miserable. Then I'll make their lives worse. Alexander's voice was hard now, certain. I've built an empire, Emily. I've destroyed competitors and outlasted enemies and survived things that should have broken me. If anyone tries to hurt you, they'll have to go through me first. The intensity in his voice should have been frightening. Instead, it made Emily's heart race. Why me? She whispered. You could have anyone. Someone from your world. Someone who knows how to navigate all this. I don't want someone from my world, Alexander said. I want someone real. Someone who looks at me and sees a person, not a bank account. Someone who... He stopped, searching for words. Someone who sent me a photograph by accident and somehow cracked through 5 years of walls in a single moment. Emily's eyes stung. That's not fair. I know. You're asking me to risk everything. I know that too. Alexander leaned forward. But I'm willing to risk everything right back. My reputation, my company's stability, the carefully controlled image I've spent years building, all of it, for a chance at something real. And what happens when reality doesn't live up to the fantasy? Emily asked. When you realize I'm just a broke assistant with student debt and a brother to support and nothing to offer except you, Alexander interrupted. You offer yourself, and that's everything. The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She wanted to believe him, wanted to take the leap, but fear was a powerful thing. I need time, she said finally. Alexander nodded slowly. How much time? I don't know. Days? Weeks? Months? I don't know, Emily repeated, her voice cracking. I need to think. I need to figure out if I'm strong enough for this. Alexander reached across the table again, and this time Emily let him take her hand. You're strong enough, he said quietly. I've seen you carry the weight of the world and still show kindness to a little girl you didn't know. You're stronger than you think. Emily's vision blurred. You keep saying that. Because it's true. They sat there, hands clasped, the restaurant moving around them in a blur of other people's lives. Finally, Alexander spoke. Take all the time you need, he said. But Emily, I'm not going anywhere, even if you decide this is too much, even if you walk away. I'll still be here. It was the worst thing he could have said, because it made Emily believe him, and believing was dangerous. The dinner ended quietly. Alexander paid the bill despite Emily's protests, and they walked out into the warm Friday night together. On the sidewalk outside Lucia's, they stood facing each other, the city moving around them. Can I call you a car? Alexander asked. I'll take the subway. Emily, I need to think, she said. And I can't think clearly when you're looking at me like that. Like what? Like I matter. Alexander's expression grew pained. You do matter. Emily shook her head. I'll see you Monday. She started to walk away. Emily. She stopped but didn't turn around. For what it's worth, Alexander said quietly, you've mattered to me since the moment I saw that photograph, and nothing you do or don't do is going to change that. Emily's throat closed. She walked away without responding, her eyes burning, her heart breaking and mending and breaking again. She took the subway home in a daze, climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, and collapsed on her bed, still wearing the green dress. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Did you see I got an A on my midterm? Thanks for helping me study. Emily smiled despite everything and texted back. Proud of you. Another buzz. A different number this time. Thank you for tonight. Whatever you decide, I meant what I said. Alexander. Emily stared at the message for a long time. Then she did something reckless. She opened her camera, took a photograph of herself lying on her bed in the green dress, hair spread across the pillow, eyes tired but real, and sent it to Alexander with a single line of text. "This is who I am. Are you sure?" The response came 30 seconds later. "I've never been more sure of anything." Emily closed her eyes, her heart pounding. She was going to do this. She was going to take the leap. And she had absolutely no idea if she was strong enough to survive the fall. But for the first time in 7 years, Emily Carter decided to stop just surviving. She decided to live, even if it destroyed her. The decision to live instead of just survive turned out to be more complicated than Emily expected. Monday morning arrived with the kind of humidity that made New York feel like it was wrapped in wet wool. Emily dressed carefully, choosing a navy dress that felt like armor, and took the subway downtown with her stomach in knots. She didn't know what to expect. Didn't know if Friday night had changed everything or nothing at all. The answer came at 9:15 when Patricia appeared at Emily's desk with an envelope. "Mr. Hayes asked me to give you this," the older woman said, her expression carefully neutral. Emily took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single card with Alexander's handwriting. "My office, 10 a.m. Please." The word "please" felt significant somehow, like he was giving her a choice instead of issuing a command. Emily showed up at 9:58. Alexander was on the phone when she entered, his back to the door, tension visible in every line of his body. He was speaking in clipped sentences about quarterly projections and investor concerns, but when he heard the door close, he cut the conversation short. "I'll call you back," he said, and hung up without waiting for a response. He turned to face Emily, and she saw immediately that he hadn't slept. "You came," he said. "You asked me to." Alexander moved around his desk but kept his distance, like he was afraid of spooking her. "About Friday night." "I'm in," Emily interrupted. Alexander went very still. "What?" "I'm in," she repeated, forcing the words out before fear could stop her. "I don't know how this works. I don't know if we're insane for even trying, but I'm tired of being afraid, so I'm in." Something like relief flooded Alexander's expression, followed immediately by concern. "Emily, if you're not sure—" "I'm not sure about anything," she said honestly, "but I'm choosing this anyway. I'm choosing you, us, whatever this is." Alexander closed the distance between them in 3 steps and pulled her into his arms. Emily stiffened for half a second. They were at work. Anyone could walk in. But then she felt him trembling slightly, and she realized he'd been just as terrified as she was. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. Emily pulled back just enough to look at him. "Don't thank me yet. I have no idea what I'm doing." "Neither do I," Alexander admitted. "But we'll figure it out." It sounded simple when he said it like that. It wasn't simple at all. The first real complication arrived that afternoon in the form of Marcus Webb, Hayes Global's chief operating officer and Alexander's oldest friend. Emily was working at her desk when Marcus appeared, leaning against her cubicle with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. "Emily Carter," he said, like he was testing out her name. "Alexander's been talking about you." Emily looked up warily. Marcus was in his mid-30s, handsome in an obvious way, with the kind of smile that probably got him whatever he wanted. "Has he?" Emily said carefully. "Relax. I'm not here to interrogate you." Marcus pulled up a chair and sat down uninvited. "I'm here because Alexander Hayes doesn't talk about anyone, ever, and suddenly your name keeps coming up in conversations." Emily's heart sank. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." Marcus studied her with sharp eyes. "Look, I've known Alex since college. I was there when he met Catherine. I watched him build this company from nothing, and I watched him die inside when she was killed." Emily's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because for the first time in 5 years, he seems like he might actually be alive again," Marcus said bluntly. "And I need to know if you're serious or if you're just..." "Just what?" Emily's voice went cold. "Using him? After his money? Are you?" "No." The word came out hard and certain. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't plan it. And if you think I'm the kind of person who—" "I don't," Marcus interrupted. "If I did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I'd have already made your life miserable." Emily stared at him. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand what you're walking into. Marcus's expression grew serious. Alexander has enemies. People who'd love to see him fail. People who'll use anyone close to him to make that happen. If you're with him, you're a target. He told me that already. Did he tell you about Richard Chen? Emily shook her head. Marcus glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then lowered his voice. Richard Chen used to be Alexander's business partner. They started Hayes Global together, 50-50 ownership. But Richard got greedy, started making side deals, cooking books, using company resources for personal projects. What happened? Alexander caught him, forced him out, took full control of the company. Marcus's jaw tightened. Richard didn't take it well. He spent 2 years trying to destroy Alexander, spread rumors, sabotaged deals. And when none of that worked, he went after Catherine. Emily's blood went cold. What do you mean? He hired someone to follow her, dig up dirt. There wasn't any, so he manufactured it. Fake photos suggesting she was having an affair. Anonymous tips to tabloids about drug use that never happened. Marcus's voice was hard. Catherine was strong, but that kind of sustained attack breaks people. She started having panic attacks, couldn't sleep. The night she died, she and Alexander had been fighting about whether to file a restraining order. Emily felt sick. The drunk driver was just a drunk driver, Marcus said. But if Catherine hadn't been upset, if she hadn't left the house that night, she'd still be alive. And Alexander blames Richard Chen for that. Where's he now? Emily asked quietly. Prison, finally. Caught on fraud charges 2 years ago. Marcus paused. But he's up for parole next month. And if he gets out, Alexander thinks he'll come after him again. Not him, Marcus corrected. He'll come after whoever Alexander cares about. That's how men like Richard operate. They find your weakness and exploit it. Emily's hands were shaking. So you're telling me to walk away? I'm telling you to be careful, Marcus said. If you're serious about this, you need to go in with your eyes open. Because it won't be easy. People will talk. They'll question your motives. Some of them will actively try to destroy you just to hurt Alexander. And you? Emily asked. What will you do? Marcus stood up, his expression unreadable. I'll protect my best friend, he said simply. Which means if you hurt him, I'll make you regret it. But if you're good for him, if you make him happy, then I'll have your back, even against Richard Chen. He walked away before Emily could respond. She sat at her desk, staring at nothing, trying to process what she'd just learned. Alexander had told her his world was dangerous. But hearing the specifics, understanding what had happened to Catherine, what could happen to her, made it real in a way that terrified her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. Dinner tonight? My place. I'll cook. Sophie wants to see you. Emily stared at the message, Marcus's warnings echoing in her head. She should say no, should slow this down before it became something she couldn't control. Instead, she typed, What time? The response came immediately. 6. I'll send a car. Emily smiled despite everything. I told you, no cars. Text me the address. I'll take the subway. A pause. Then, You're stubborn. You like stubborn. Another pause, longer this time. Yes, I do. Emily's heart squeezed. She pocketed her phone and tried to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to tonight, to Alexander's penthouse, to Sophie, to the dangerous thing she was building with a man she barely knew. At 5:30, she left the office and went home to change. Alexander's penthouse was on the Upper East Side, in one of those buildings where doormen wore white gloves and elevators required key cards to access the upper floors. Emily arrived at 6:05, her stomach in knots, wearing jeans and a simple sweater because she refused to pretend to be something she wasn't. The doorman checked her name against a list and escorted her to a private elevator. Penthouse level, he said, handing her a key card. Mr. Hayes is expecting you. The elevator rose smoothly, and Emily watched the floor numbers climb with increasing dread. By the time the doors opened directly into Alexander's apartment, her palms were sweating. The space was exactly what she'd expected, and nothing like it at all. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Minimalist furniture. Art that probably cost more than Emily's yearly salary. But there were also toys scattered across the living room floor. A blanket fort built between two chairs. drawings taped to the refrigerator in the open kitchen. Alexander appeared from around a corner, wearing jeans and a t-shirt, his hair slightly messy, looking more human than Emily had ever seen him. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice. "You keep saying that like you expect me to bail. Can you blame me?" Before Emily could answer, a small blur of energy came racing down the hallway. "Emily!" Sophie crashed into Emily's legs, hugging her with the unselfconscious enthusiasm of a 7-year-old who hadn't learned yet that adults didn't always want to be touched. Emily's chest squeezed. She knelt down to Sophie's level. "Hey, kiddo, I heard you wanted to see me." "I've been waiting forever," Sophie said dramatically. "Daddy said you might not come because you were busy, but I knew you would because you promised." Emily's throat tightened. "I didn't promise." "You did, at the party. You said we could have dinner sometime." Sophie's logic was airtight. "And tonight is sometime." Emily glanced at Alexander, who shrugged helplessly. "She's not wrong," he said. Emily looked back at Sophie. "What are we having for dinner?" "Daddy's making pasta, but not the good kind from restaurants, the kind from boxes that taste weird." Alexander laughed, an actual laugh that transformed his entire face. "Thanks for the vote of confidence, Soph." "It's okay, Daddy. You're good at other things." Sophie grabbed Emily's hand. "Come see my room. I have a new horse poster." Emily let herself be dragged down the hallway, acutely aware of Alexander following behind them. Sophie's room was exactly what a 7-year-old's room should be: pink walls, stuffed animals everywhere, books stacked haphazardly, and yes, a large poster of a white horse running through a field. "That's Moonlight," Sophie explained. "She's an Arabian horse. They're the fastest and prettiest." "She's beautiful," Emily said honestly. Sophie beamed. "Do you like horses?" "I don't know much about them," Emily admitted. "We didn't have horses where I grew up." "Where did you grow up?" "Ohio, a small town you've probably never heard of." Sophie considered this. "Did you have a mom and dad?" Emily's chest tightened. "I had a mom. She died when I was in college, and a dad who left when I was little." "My mom died too," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "When I was 3, I don't remember her very much, just that she smelled nice and she sang me songs at bedtime." Emily's eyes stung. She glanced at Alexander, who was leaning in the doorway with an expression that looked like it was taking everything he had to hold himself together. "That sounds like a nice memory," Emily said softly. Sophie nodded. "Daddy says she would have liked you." Emily's breath caught. "He does?" "Yeah, he said you're kind like she was and that you make him smile." Sophie tilted her head. "Do you like my daddy?" The question was so direct, so innocent, that Emily didn't know how to answer. "Sophie," Alexander started. "I do," Emily said, cutting him off. "Your daddy's a good person." "Are you going to be my new mom?" The question hung in the air like something explosive. Alexander moved into the room quickly. "Soph, we talked about this, remember? Emily is my friend, not—" "But I want her to be," Sophie said, her voice going small. "Everyone at school has moms, and I just have you and Mrs. Patterson, and she doesn't even like me." "Mrs. Patterson likes you fine," Alexander said gently, kneeling beside his daughter. "She's just not warm and fuzzy." "I want warm and fuzzy," Sophie whispered. "I want someone who does my hair nice and helps me pick out clothes and comes to my horse shows." Emily's heart shattered. She looked at Alexander, saw the pain in his eyes, and made a decision that was probably incredibly stupid. "I can come to your horse shows," Emily said quietly. Sophie's head snapped up. "Really? If your dad says it's okay, and if you want me there?" "I want you there." Sophie's voice was fierce now. "I want you at all of them." Emily glanced at Alexander, who looked like he was barely breathing. "Then I'll be there," Emily promised. Sophie threw her arms around Emily's neck, and Emily held her tight, feeling the weight of what she'd just committed to. Over Sophie's head, Alexander mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Dinner was chaos in the best possible way. Alexander's pasta was, as Sophie had predicted, mediocre at best, but they ate it anyway, sitting around the kitchen island with Sophie chattering about school and horses, and her best friend Mia, who had just gotten braces. Emily found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. This felt real, normal, like the kind of life she'd stopped letting herself imagine. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Emily her favorite movie, something animated about talking animals that Emily had never heard of. They curled up on the couch together, Sophie wedged between Emily and Alexander, and watched the whole thing. Halfway through, Sophie fell asleep with her head on Emily's shoulder. Alexander carefully picked up his daughter and carried her to her bedroom. Emily heard him singing softly, the same lullaby Sophie had mentioned her mother used to sing. When he came back, Emily was still on the couch, feeling like an intruder in this perfect, painful moment. "She likes you," Alexander said quietly, sitting down beside her. "She barely knows me. She knows enough." Alexander was quiet for a moment. Catherine used to say that Sophie had good instincts about people, that kids can tell who's genuine and who's faking it. Emily's throat felt tight. "I'm not trying to replace her mother." "I know." Alexander's voice was soft. "But Emily, you have to understand what you're signing up for. Sophie gets attached fast. And if this doesn't work out between us, if you walk away—" "I'm not going to hurt her," Emily said firmly. "You can't promise that." "Yes, I can." Emily turned to face him. "I know what it's like to lose people. I know what it does to you, and I would never, ever do that to a kid. So if this falls apart, it won't be because I disappeared. It'll be because you and I couldn't make it work, but I'll still be in Sophie's life if she wants me to be." Alexander stared at her. "You mean that?" "Yes." Something in Alexander's expression cracked open. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly. "I know it's too fast. I know it's reckless, but I can't stop it." Emily's heart hammered. "Alexander, you don't have to say it back," he continued. "I just needed you to know. Because if we're doing this, I'm all in, not halfway, not careful, all in." Emily knew she should slow this down, should be smart, should protect herself. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. Alexander froze for half a second, surprised, then kissed her back with a desperation that took Emily's breath away. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was 5 years of loneliness and grief and fear all pouring out at once. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I'm terrified," Emily whispered. "Me too," Alexander admitted. "But I'm still all in." Alexander pulled her close, and Emily let herself sink into him, feeling safer than she had in years. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other on the couch, the city glittering beyond the windows. Finally, Alexander spoke. "There's something you need to know." Emily pulled back to look at him. "What?" "Richard Chen, my old business partner. He's up for parole next month." Emily's stomach dropped. "Marcus told me about him." Alexander's jaw tightened. "What did he tell you?" "That Richard tried to destroy Catherine, that he might come after anyone close to you." "He will," Alexander said flatly. "If he gets out, he'll come after me, and he'll use you to do it." "Then we'll deal with it," Emily said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "Emily, you don't understand what he's capable of, so explain it to me." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. 3 weeks before Catherine died, Richard sent her a package, he said finally. Inside were photographs of Sophie, at school, at the playground, walking home with her nanny, all taken from a distance, like someone had been watching her. Emily's blood went cold. "Catherine was terrified," Alexander continued, his voice hollow. "She wanted to pull Sophie out of school, hire private security, move to another city. I told her we'd handle it legally, that we'd get a restraining order and press charges and Richard would go to prison." "But he didn't," Emily said quietly. "Not then. The police said there wasn't enough evidence, that we couldn't prove Richard had sent the photos." Alexander's hands clenched into fists. "So I went to see him myself, told him if he ever came near my family again, I'd destroy him." "What did he say?" "He smiled," Alexander said, and the memory clearly haunted him. "He smiled and said, 'You can't watch them all the time, Alex. Eventually you'll slip, and when you do, I'll be there.'" Emily felt sick. 2 weeks later, Catherine was dead, Alexander finished. And Richard had an alibi. Was at a business conference in Chicago when it happened. But I know he was involved somehow, I just could never prove it. "Alexander, so when I say he'll come after you, I mean it," Alexander said fiercely. "He'll follow you, threaten you, try to break you down the way he broke Catherine down. And I can't—" His voice cracked. "I can't lose someone else to him." Emily took Alexander's face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Then we'll be smarter this time, she said. We'll take precautions. We'll document everything, and we won't let him win. What if that's not enough? Then we'll figure it out, Emily said. Together. But Alexander, you can't protect me from everything, and you can't let fear of what might happen stop us from living. Alexander closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. You're braver than I am, he whispered. No, I'm just too stubborn to quit. Alexander laughed, broken and rough, and pulled her close again. They stayed like that until midnight, talking about everything and nothing. About Sophie and Jake and what it meant to survive loss. About the impossible thing they were trying to build. Finally, Emily called a car, not because Alexander insisted, but because the subway at midnight felt like tempting fate. Alexander walked her down to the lobby, his hand warm in hers. Thank you for tonight, he said. For coming. For being patient with Sophie. For... He stopped, searching for words. For choosing this. Us. Thank you for trusting me, Emily said softly. They stood in the marble lobby, not wanting to let go. Finally, the doorman cleared his throat. Your car is here, miss. Emily nodded. She started to pull away, but Alexander held on. Emily. She looked back. Be careful, he said. Please. If anything feels wrong, if anyone approaches you, I'll call you, Emily promised. I'll be smart. Alexander nodded, but the worry didn't leave his eyes. Emily kissed him once more, soft and quick, then got in the car before she could change her mind. She watched through the window as Alexander stood in the lobby, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. And for the first time, Emily wondered if choosing to live might actually kill her. The text came at 2 a.m, jolting Emily awake. An unknown number. Stay away from Alexander Hayes. This is your only warning. Emily's blood turned to ice. She stared at the message, her heart pounding, trying to decide what to do. Another text arrived. This one was a photograph of Emily, leaving Alexander's building, taken from across the street, zoomed in, unmistakable. Emily's hand shook as she dialed Alexander's number. He picked up on the first ring. Emily, what's wrong? I got a text, she said, her voice trembling. A warning and a photo of me leaving your building tonight. Silence. Then, I'm coming to get you. No. I'm already getting dressed, Alexander said, and she could hear him moving. Pack a bag. Enough for a few days. I'm bringing you here where it's safe. Alexander, I can't just... Please. His voice cracked. Please, Emily. I can't do this again. I can't sit here wondering if something's going to happen to you. Emily closed her eyes, fear and stubbornness warring inside her. Okay, she whispered. Okay. 20 minutes later, Alexander's driver pulled up outside Emily's building in a black SUV with tinted windows. Emily climbed in with a hastily packed duffel bag, her entire body shaking. Alexander was in the back seat. The moment he saw her, he pulled her into his arms. You're okay, he said, more to himself than to her. You're okay. Emily held on to him, trying to stop trembling. Who was it? She asked. Richard? I don't know yet, Alexander said grimly, but I'm going to find out. The SUV pulled away from the curb, and Emily watched her building disappear into the night. She'd made a choice to live instead of just survive. But survival, it turned out, was about to get a lot more complicated. And somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching, waiting, planning. The war for Alexander Hayes' heart had just begun, and Emily Carter was now the battlefield. The penthouse felt different at 2 a.m. The city lights beyond the windows looked cold instead of beautiful, and every shadow seemed to hide something dangerous. Alexander had Emily's phone in his hand, staring at the threatening messages with an expression that scared her more than the texts themselves. I should have seen this coming, he said, his voice flat and controlled in a way that suggested he was holding back rage. I should have protected you better. You couldn't have known, Emily said, sitting on the edge of his couch with her duffel bag at her feet, still wearing the jeans and sweater she'd thrown on. And I'm fine. It's just a text. It's not just a text. Alexander looked at her and his eyes were hard. It's a threat. And whoever sent it was watching you, following you. Emily's stomach turned. She'd known that intellectually, but hearing Alexander say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified her. Marcus appeared from the hallway, also dressed despite the hour. Alexander had called him immediately, and he'd arrived within 15 minutes. I traced the number, Marcus said, holding up his own phone. Burner. Bought with cash 3 days ago at a bodega in Brooklyn. No cameras nearby. Dead end. What about the photo? Alexander asked. Metadata stripped. Could have been taken with any smartphone. Marcus looked at Emily with something like sympathy. Whoever this is, they know what they're doing. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. So what now? Now we keep you safe, Alexander said. You stay here until we figure out who's behind this. I can't just move into your penthouse, Emily protested. I have a job, a life. Jake needs... Your brother is in Ohio, Alexander interrupted. He's safe. You're not. Alexander, I'm hiring security, he continued, talking over her. Someone to watch your apartment, trace any unusual activity, and when you do go back, you're not going alone. Emily stood up, frustration overriding fear. You can't just make decisions for me. I'm not making decisions for you, Alexander said, his voice rising slightly. I'm trying to keep you alive. By locking me up here like some princess in a tower? Emily shot back. That's not how this works. That's not how I work. Then how does it work, Emily? Alexander's control was cracking now. Because from where I'm standing, someone just threatened you because of me, because you decided to be with me. So forgive me if I'm a little bit desperate to make sure you don't end up like Catherine. The name hung in the air like something poisonous. Marcus cleared his throat. I'm going to give you 2 a minute. He disappeared down the hallway, leaving Emily and Alexander alone in the vast living room. Emily took a breath, trying to calm down. I'm scared too, she said quietly. But Alexander, I can't live in a cage, even a gilded one. If we do that, whoever sent those texts wins. They want me isolated, dependent on you, easy to control. Alexander's jaw tightened. So what do you suggest? We're smart about this, Emily said. We take precautions. We're careful, but we don't let fear run our lives. Fear is what keeps people alive. No, Emily corrected. Fear is what keeps people breathing. There's a difference. Alexander stared at her for a long moment, then ran both hands through his hair in frustration. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to care about someone and not destroy myself trying to protect them. Emily crossed the room and took his hands. Then let me help you learn, she said softly. Alexander pulled her close, and Emily felt him trembling. I can't lose you, he whispered. You won't. You can't promise that. No, Emily agreed. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay alive, and I need you to trust me to do that. Alexander held her tighter, his face buried in her hair. They stood like that until Marcus came back, holding a laptop. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but you need to see this. Alexander reluctantly let go of Emily, and they both moved to look at the screen. Marcus had pulled up a series of articles about Richard Chen's upcoming parole hearing. It's scheduled for next Tuesday, Marcus said, and according to my contacts, he's got a decent shot at getting out. On what grounds? Alexander's voice was ice. Good behavior, overcrowding, the usual. Marcus scrolled through the documents. But here's the interesting part. Richard's been getting regular visits from someone. A woman. Name flagged as Victoria Reeves. Emily frowned. Who's that? That's what I'm trying to figure out, Marcus said. The name doesn't pull anything useful. Could be an alias. Alexander's expression darkened. He's planning something. Probably, Marcus agreed, but we don't know what yet. Could be he's just trying to rebuild his life. Could be he's coming after you. We won't know until he makes a move. I'm not waiting for him to make a move, Alexander said. I want surveillance on him the moment he walks out of that prison. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to. Already on it, Marcus said. But Alex, legally, we can't. I don't care about legally, Alexander cut him off. I care about keeping my family safe. Emily's chest tightened at the word family. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, I'll handle it. He looked at Emily. You should try to get some sleep. It's almost 3. Emily wanted to argue, but exhaustion was hitting her like a physical weight. Alexander showed her to a guest room that was bigger than her entire apartment. The bed was enormous, covered in expensive linens that probably cost more than her monthly rent. There's clothes in the closet, Alexander said. Left over from... He stopped, his expression pained. From before. They might fit you. Emily understood. Catherine's clothes. The wife he'd lost. I brought my own stuff, she said gently. Right, of course. Alexander looked lost, standing in the doorway. If you need anything, I know where to find you. He nodded, but didn't leave. Alexander, Emily said softly. I'm okay. We're okay. Are we? Emily crossed to him and kissed him gently. We're okay, she repeated. Alexander kissed her back, deeper this time, desperate, then pulled away before it could go further. Get some sleep, he said roughly. We'll figure everything else out tomorrow. He left, closing the door behind him. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her heart racing, and pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from Jake. It was late in Ohio, but he was probably still up studying. She called him back. Em? He sounded worried. Where are you? I tried calling your apartment and you didn't answer. I'm staying with a friend, Emily said, hating the lie. Everything's fine. You never stay with friends. What's going on? Emily closed her eyes. Jake knew her too well. I'm seeing someone, she said carefully. It's new. We're figuring things out. Seeing someone? Jake's voice perked up. Like dating? Em, that's great. Who is he? Just someone I work with. It's complicated. Complicated how? Jake, is he good to you? Her brother's voice went protective. Because if he's not, I don't care how far away I am. He's good to me, Emily said, and meant it. Really good. I'm nervous. It's been a long time since I let myself care about someone like this. You deserve to be happy, Jake said firmly. After everything you've done for me, everything you've sacrificed, Em, you deserve someone who treats you like you matter. Emily's eyes burned. Thanks, Jake. When do I get to meet him? Soon, Emily lied. I promise. They talked for a few more minutes about his classes and his upcoming exams, and by the time Emily hung up, she felt slightly more grounded. She changed into pajamas, climbed into the enormous bed, and tried to sleep. It took hours. Morning came too fast and too bright. Emily woke to voices in the hallway, Alexander and Sophie talking quietly. But why is Emily here? Sophie was asking. She's staying with us for a little while, Alexander said carefully. Is that okay? Yes. Sophie sounded thrilled. Can she have breakfast with us? If she wants to, but Soph, you need to understand, Emily has her own life, her own apartment. She's not moving in permanently. Why not? Alexander sighed. Because that's not how it works, sweetheart. But you like her, and I like her, so she should stay. Sophie, please, Daddy, please, can she stay? Emily's heart squeezed. She should probably interrupt, let them know she was awake, but she couldn't move. We'll see, Alexander said finally. But for now, let's let her sleep, okay? She had a long night. Okay, Sophie agreed reluctantly. Footsteps moved away from the door. Emily lay in the expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the fact that a 7-year-old wanted her to stay more than Emily had ever wanted anything in her life. This was dangerous. Getting attached to Sophie, getting attached to Alexander, building a life in her head that probably couldn't exist in reality. But it was too late to protect herself now. She was already attached. Emily got up, showered in a bathroom that had heated floors and a rainfall showerhead, and pulled on clean clothes from her duffel. When she emerged, she found Alexander in the kitchen making coffee while Sophie ate cereal at the island. Emily! Sophie scrambled down from her stool and ran over. You're here! I am, Emily said, kneeling down to hug her. Good morning. Are you staying forever? Sophie, Alexander warned. I'm staying for a little while, Emily said diplomatically. Is that okay? Yes, Sophie beamed. Can we make pancakes? Sophie, Emily might not want... I want pancakes, Emily interrupted, smiling at Alexander. If that's okay. Something in Alexander's expression softened. Pancakes it is. They made breakfast together, messy and chaotic, with Sophie insisting on helping and getting flour everywhere. Alexander tried to maintain control, but it was a losing battle, and eventually he gave up and just laughed. Emily watched him laugh with his daughter and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. She was falling in love with him. Not just attraction, not just chemistry, love. The real terrifying no-going-back kind. After breakfast, Sophie had a playdate that couldn't be canceled, so the nanny came to pick her up. Alexander watched from the window as the car pulled away, his expression tight with worry. "She has security with her," he said, more to himself than to Emily. "3 trained professionals. She's safe." "She's safe," Emily echoed. Alexander turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes was almost unbearable. "I need to tell you something," he said. Emily's stomach dropped. "Okay. After Catherine died, I made a promise to myself. I promised I'd never let anyone close enough to hurt me or Sophie again. I'd be professional, controlled, safe." He crossed to her slowly. "And then you sent me that photograph by accident, and I saw someone real, someone struggling, someone alive. And I couldn't stop thinking about you." Emily's throat felt tight. "I tried to keep my distance," Alexander continued. "I really did. But then Sophie met you, and she lit up in a way I hadn't seen since she was 3 years old. And I realized I had a choice. I could protect myself and Sophie from ever being hurt again, or I could take a risk on something real." "And you chose the risk," Emily whispered. "I chose you," Alexander corrected. "Even though it terrifies me, even though I know how badly this could end, I chose you." Emily stepped forward and kissed him. This time, neither of them held back. The kiss was desperate and raw, 5 years of loneliness and grief pouring out all at once. Alexander backed Emily against the kitchen counter, his hands in her hair, and Emily pulled him closer, needing to feel that he was real. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I'm falling in love with you," Emily said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I know it's too fast, I know it's crazy, but I am." Alexander's expression cracked open. "Thank God," he breathed, "because I'm already there." He kissed her again, and this time Emily felt the shift. This wasn't just attraction anymore. This was something bigger, stronger, more dangerous. This was everything. They stayed tangled together in the kitchen until Alexander's phone rang. He pulled back reluctantly, glancing at the screen. "It's Marcus," he said. "Answer it." Alexander put the phone on speaker. "Talk to me," he said. "We've got a problem." Marcus's voice came through, tense. "Richard Chen made parole. He's being released tomorrow." Emily felt Alexander's entire body go rigid. "Tomorrow?" His voice was deadly calm. "The hearing wasn't until Tuesday. Emergency review. Overcrowding crisis. Judge fast-tracked it." Marcus sounded furious. "I just got the notification 10 minutes ago." "Where's he going?" "Halfway house in Queens, but Alex, there's more. That woman who's been visiting him, Victoria Reeves, I finally got an ID on her." "Who is she?" "Victoria Chen, Richard's younger sister. She changed her last name 5 years ago, right after he went to prison." Alexander's jaw clenched. "He's been coordinating with her this whole time." "Looks like it," Marcus confirmed. "And get this, Victoria works in corporate security. She has access to surveillance systems, background checks, the whole deal." Emily's blood went cold. "She could have been following me." "That's my guess," Marcus said. "I'm running a full background on her now, but it's going to take time." "I don't have time," Alexander said. "Richard gets out tomorrow, and the moment he does, he's coming for me. For us. Then we prepare," Marcus said. "I've got security lined up, round-the-clock surveillance on both Richard and Victoria, and I'm having someone sweep your penthouse for bugs and trackers." "Do it," Alexander said. "And Marcus, I want to know the second Richard walks out of that prison." "You got it." The line went dead. Alexander stood frozen, his mind clearly racing through scenarios and contingencies. Emily touched his arm gently. "We knew this was coming," she said. "Knowing and living it are different things." Alexander's voice was hollow. "He's going to come after you, Emily. He's going to try to break you the way he broke Catherine. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive that again." "Then it's a good thing you're not doing it alone this time," Emily said firmly. Alexander looked at her, searching her face. "You should leave," he said quietly. "Go back to your apartment. Go back to your life before this gets worse." "No." "Emily." "No," she repeated, stronger now. "I'm not running, and I'm not letting you push me away because you're scared." "I'm not scared," Alexander said. I'm terrified. There's a difference. So am I, Emily admitted, but I'm staying anyway, because that's what love means. You don't bail when things get hard. Alexander pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight it almost hurt. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Probably not, Emily said against his chest, but you're stuck with me anyway. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people holding each other together. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Marcus brought in a security team that swept the penthouse and found nothing. He installed additional cameras, changed Alexander's access codes, set up protocols for Sophie's movements. Emily called in sick to work, which felt wrong but necessary. Michelle texted asking if she was okay, and Emily lied and said she had the flu. Jake called twice, and both times Emily kept the conversation light and normal, not mentioning the threats or Richard Chen or the fact that she was currently living in a billionaire's penthouse because leaving might get her killed. Tuesday morning arrived with rain and the kind of cold that felt personal. Richard Chen was released from prison at 9 a.m. Marcus called at 9:03. He's out, he said without preamble, walked out the front gates, got into a car with Victoria, and drove to the halfway house in Queens. They're there now. Alexander was pacing the living room, unable to sit still. How long will he stay there? Legally? At least 30 days, but if he violates parole, he could be back inside within hours. Then we make him violate, Alexander said coldly. Alex, I'm not sitting around waiting for him to make a move, Marcus. Not this time. Emily, sitting on the couch with her laptop pretending to work, looked up sharply. What are you planning? She asked. Alexander didn't answer immediately. Marcus filled the silence. Alex, whatever you're thinking, don't. If you go after Richard and it goes wrong, he wins. He gets to play the victim. I don't care. You should, Marcus said firmly. Because right now we have the upper hand. He doesn't know we're watching him. He doesn't know we've ID'd Victoria. If we move too fast, we lose that advantage. Alexander's hands clenched into fists, but he didn't argue. Fine, he said finally. We wait, but the second he steps out of line, we bury him, Marcus promised. Legally this time. The call ended. Alexander stood by the windows, staring out at the rain-soaked city. Emily set her laptop aside and went to him. Talk to me, she said quietly. I feel helpless, Alexander admitted. I've built an empire. I have money and power and influence. And none of it matters because I can't protect the people I love from a man who wants to destroy me. You're not helpless, Emily said. You're human. There's a difference. Is there? Alexander's voice was bitter. Because from where I'm standing, being human just means being vulnerable. It also means having people who care about you, Emily countered. Marcus is risking his career to help you. I'm risking my safety to be with you. Sophie loves you unconditionally. You're not alone in this, Alexander. Stop acting like you are. Alexander turned to look at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. I'm so tired, he whispered. I'm so tired of fighting. Emily pulled him close, and for the first time since she'd met him, Alexander Hayes let himself break down. He cried against her shoulder, silent, shaking sobs that felt like they'd been building for 5 years. Emily held him through it, running her fingers through his hair, whispering that it was okay, that she had him, that he wasn't alone. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clearer. I'm sorry, he said roughly. Don't apologize for being human, Emily said softly. Alexander kissed her, gentle this time, grateful, and rested his forehead against hers. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not running, for staying, for... He stopped, seeming to search for words. For making me feel like maybe I can survive this after all. Emily's chest ached. We'll survive it together. The moment was broken by Emily's phone buzzing. She pulled it out, expecting Jake or Michelle. Instead, it was another unknown number. Her blood went cold. Alexander saw her expression and immediately went on alert. What is it? Emily opened the message. It was a photograph of Sophie at her playdate, taken through a window from outside. Below it, a single line of text. She's beautiful. It would be a shame if something happened to her. Emily's hand shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. Alexander grabbed it, read the message, and went absolutely white. Then his expression shifted into something terrifying, pure, cold rage. He dialed Marcus. Get Sophie. Now. I don't care where she is or who she's with. Get her and bring her here immediately. Alex, what? Richard just threatened my daughter. Alexander cut him off, his voice deadly calm. So I'm done playing nice. Get Sophie to safety, then meet me at the halfway house in Queens. Alexander, don't. Alexander hung up and headed for the door. Emily grabbed his arm. What are you doing? Ending this, Alexander said flatly. By doing what? Beating him up? Getting yourself arrested? Emily's voice rose. That's exactly what he wants. He's baiting you. I don't care. Yes, you do, Emily said fiercely. Because if you get arrested, who protects Sophie? Who runs Hayes Global? Who makes sure Richard doesn't win? Alexander stopped, his jaw working. He threatened my daughter, he said, and his voice cracked. He sent someone to watch her, to photograph her, to oots. I know, Emily said, and we're going to stop him, but not like this, not by playing his game. Alexander's phone rang. Marcus. I've got Sophie, Marcus said immediately. She's safe. I'm bringing her to the penthouse now. How long? 15 minutes. Alexander closed his eyes in relief. Thank you, he said roughly. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said, because I just got word from my contact at NYPD. They're opening an investigation into the threats against Emily, the texts, the photos, all of it, and they want to question Richard Chen. Alexander's eyes snapped open. When? They're sending officers to the halfway house right now. A grim smile crossed Alexander's face. Good, he said. Let him explain to his parole officer why he's harassing people within 24 hours of getting out. There's more, Marcus said. Victoria's car was spotted near Sophie's playdate. Security cameras caught her license plate. If the police can tie her to the photo of Sophie, they're both going down, Alexander finished. Looks like it, Marcus confirmed. Justice system might be slow, but it's thorough, and Richard just gave us everything we need to put him back in prison. The relief on Alexander's face was almost painful to watch. Keep me updated, he said. Will do. See you in 10. Alexander hung up and immediately pulled Emily into his arms. It's going to be okay, he said, more to himself than to her. Sophie's safe. Richard's about to violate parole. We're going to be okay. Emily held him tight, feeling his heart racing against hers. We're going to be okay, she echoed. But even as she said it, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that this wasn't over. Men like Richard Chen didn't go down easily, and whatever was coming next was going to test all of them in ways they couldn't imagine. Sophie arrived at the penthouse 15 minutes later, confused and frightened by the sudden change in plans. She ran straight to Alexander, who scooped her up and held her so tight Emily worried he might hurt her. Daddy, you're squishing me, Sophie complained, but she hugged him back just as fiercely. Sorry, sweetheart, Alexander said, his voice rough. He set her down but kept one hand on her shoulder. Are you okay? Did anything strange happen at Mia's house? Sophie shook her head. No, we were just playing with her new dollhouse. Why did I have to leave early? Alexander glanced at Marcus, then at Emily, clearly struggling with how much to tell a 7-year-old. Emily knelt down beside Sophie. Your dad just wanted to make sure you were safe, she said gently. Sometimes grown-ups worry about things, even when everything's probably fine. Sophie looked between them, with the two perceptive eyes of a kid who'd learned early that adults didn't always tell the whole truth. Is it because of the bad man? She asked quietly. Alexander went very still. What bad man, Soph? The one you and Uncle Marcus talk about sometimes when you think I'm not listening. Sophie's voice was small. The one who hurt Mommy. Emily's chest squeezed painfully. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and pulled Sophie close again. Yes, he said honestly. It's because of him. But I promise you he's not going to hurt anyone ever again. Okay? Sophie nodded against his chest. Okay, Daddy. Then she pulled back and looked at Emily. Will you stay with us until the bad man goes away? Emily's throat felt tight. Yeah, kiddo. I'll stay. Good, Sophie said firmly. Then with the resilience of children everywhere, she spotted her tablet on the coffee table and immediately shifted focus. Can I watch my show? Alexander laughed, broken but real. Yeah, you can watch your show. Sophie settled onto the couch, and Marcus gestured for Alexander and Emily to follow him into the kitchen where they could talk without being overheard. NYPD just picked up Richard Chen for questioning, Marcus said quietly, and they're bringing Victoria in too. The photo of Sophie was sent from her phone. She wasn't even smart enough to use a burner this time. How long can they hold them? Alexander asked. 48 hours without charging them. But with the parole violation, Richard's going straight back to prison regardless. Marcus pulled up something on his phone. And get this, Victoria made a mistake. She's been documenting everything. Photos, notes, timelines. She kept it all in a cloud storage account that she apparently thought was secure. My guy found it an hour ago. What kind of documentation? Emily asked. Marcus's expression was grim. Plans. They were planning to kidnap Sophie. The words hit like a physical blow. Alexander's face went white, then red. They what? Victoria had rental information for a van, blueprints of Sophie's school, guard schedules. They were going to grab her next week during pickup. Marcus's voice was hard. They were going to use her to force you into signing over Hayes Global, then... He stopped, glancing at Emily. Then what? Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. Then they were going to kill all three of you, Marcus said flatly. Make it look like a murder-suicide. Emily shoots you and Sophie, then herself. Victoria had already drafted the fake suicide note. Emily felt the room tilt. Alexander grabbed the counter to steady himself, his knuckles white. They're never getting out, he said, his voice shaking with fury. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who I have to call. They're never seeing daylight again. They won't need to, Marcus said. Conspiracy to commit kidnapping and murder? They're looking at life sentences. Both of them. The relief should have been immediate, total. But Emily just felt numb. Someone had planned to kill her, to kill Sophie, to destroy Alexander completely, and they'd almost gotten away with it. I need air, she said suddenly. Alexander reached for her. Emily? I just need a minute, she said, pulling away. I'm fine, I need a minute. She walked to the bathroom and locked the door behind her, then sat on the edge of the bathtub and tried to remember how to breathe. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She'd known this was dangerous. She'd known getting involved with Alexander came with risks. But knowing intellectually that someone might hurt you was different from learning they'd planned to murder you and make it look like you'd killed the people you were falling in love with. A soft knock on the door. Emily? Alexander's voice. Can I come in? Emily unlocked the door. Alexander slipped inside and closed it behind him. The bathroom was huge, but with both of them in it, the space felt small, intimate. He sat down on the floor across from her, his back against the wall. You don't have to be strong right now, he said quietly. Emily laughed, a broken, bitter sound. I don't know how to be anything else. I know the feeling. They sat in silence for a moment. They were going to kill Sophie, Emily said finally, a 7-year-old kid, because of money, because of revenge. I know. How do you live with that? Knowing people are capable of that? Alexander was quiet for a long time. You don't, he said finally. You just survive it, and you try to protect the people you love. And you fail sometimes, and it breaks you, but you keep going because the alternative is giving up. And if you give up, they win. Emily looked at him, really looked at him. At the exhaustion in his eyes, the lines around his mouth, the weight he'd been carrying for 5 years. You're not broken, she said softly. Yes, I am, Alexander corrected. I'm absolutely broken, but I'm still here, and so are you, and so is Sophie. He leaned forward. Broken doesn't mean useless, Emily. It just means you've survived something that should have destroyed you. Emily's eyes burned. I'm so tired of surviving, she whispered. I know, Alexander said, but we're past that now. We're not just surviving anymore. We're living. And living is messier and scarier and so much harder, but it's also better, because living means having something worth protecting. Emily slid off the edge of the tub and sat beside him on the floor, their shoulders touching. When did you get so wise? She asked. About 5 minutes ago, Alexander said. I'm mostly making this up as I go. Emily laughed, a real laugh this time, and leaned her head on his shoulder. They sat like that until Marcus knocked on the bathroom door. Guys, you might want to see this. They emerged to find Marcus holding his laptop, looking stunned. "What now?" Alexander asked wearily. "Richard Chen just confessed," Marcus said. "To everything. The threats against Emily, the plan to kidnap Sophie, and—" He paused, his expression complicated. "To Catherine's death." Alexander went absolutely still. "What?" "He confessed," Marcus repeated. "Said he'd been carrying the guilt for 5 years and couldn't do it anymore. Told police he'd paid the drunk driver to target Catherine. Made it look like an accident, but it was premeditated murder." The color drained from Alexander's face. Emily grabbed his hand, holding tight. "He's going to prison for the rest of his life," Marcus continued quietly. "And Victoria's going with him. It's over, Alex. They can't hurt you anymore." Alexander didn't speak, didn't move. Emily squeezed his hand. "Alexander? I need—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "I need to call Catherine's parents. They deserve to know the truth." He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and walked toward his office. Emily started to follow, but Marcus stopped her. "Let him have a minute," he said gently. "This is something he needs to do alone." Emily nodded, understanding but hating it. Sophie appeared from the living room, sensing something had changed. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Emily knelt down and pulled her into a hug. "Yeah, sweetheart," she said. "Everything's going to be okay now." And for the first time in days, she actually believed it. Alexander was on the phone for over an hour. When he finally emerged, his eyes were red, but his shoulders looked lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying a weight for 5 years and had finally been allowed to set it down. "They said thank you," he told Emily quietly. "Catherine's parents, they said—" His voice cracked. "They said they forgave me. For not protecting her. For letting her leave that night." Emily pulled him close. "There was nothing to forgive. It wasn't your fault." "I know that now," Alexander whispered. "I finally know that." The next few days passed in a strange blur of police statements and legal proceedings and news coverage that Emily tried to ignore. Hayes Global's PR team worked overtime to control the narrative. Marcus handled most of the press, spinning it as a vindication of Alexander's integrity and a tragedy finally seeing justice. Emily gave her statement to police twice, identified Victoria from a photo lineup, signed more paperwork than she'd thought possible, and through it all she stayed at the penthouse with Alexander and Sophie, the 3 of them building something that felt dangerously close to a family. 2 weeks after Richard Chen's confession, Emily's phone rang. It was her landlord. "Ms. Carter, I wanted to let you know I'm selling the building. New owners are taking over next month. They're planning renovations, so everyone's leases are being terminated." Emily's stomach dropped. "What? You can't just—" "Check your lease. I can and I am. You've got 60 days to vacate." The line went dead. Emily sat on Alexander's couch, staring at her phone, trying not to panic. She'd loved that apartment. It had been hers. The first place she'd ever lived alone. The space she'd rebuilt her life in after her mother died. And now it was gone. Alexander found her 20 minutes later, still sitting in the same spot. "What's wrong, Shit?" he asked immediately. Emily told him. "Move in here," Alexander said without hesitation. Emily blinked. "What? Move in here? With me and Sophie? Officially?" He sat beside her. "You're here every night anyway. Sophie adores you. He stopped, searching for words. "I can't imagine this place without you anymore." Emily's heart raced. "Alexander, that's huge. We've only been together for a few weeks." "I know," he said. "And if you're not ready, I understand. But Emily, I'm 32 years old. I've built a company from nothing. I've survived losing the woman I loved. I know what I want, and what I want is you. Here, with us, every morning and every night." Emily's eyes stung. "What about Sophie? What if we don't work out? I can't break her heart." "We'll work out," Alexander said with complete certainty. "I've never been more sure of anything." Emily wanted to say yes, wanted to take the leap, but fear was still there, whispering that this was too much, too fast, too good to be real. "Can I think about it?" she asked. Alexander's expression flickered with disappointment, but he nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Emily spent the next 3 days thinking. She talked to Jake, who was thrilled at the idea of his sister finally being happy. She talked to Michelle over coffee, who was skeptical but supportive. She even talked to Marcus, who surprised her by saying, "If you make him happy and you're good to Sophie, then you have my blessing. And if you hurt either of them, I know a lot of creative ways to hide a body." But the person who really helped her decide was Sophie. Emily was reading to her one night before bed when Sophie interrupted the story. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "Sure, kiddo." "Are you going to stay with us forever?" Emily's throat tightened. "What makes you ask that?" "Because Daddy's happy when you're here," Sophie said simply. "And I'm happy when you're here. And I don't want you to leave like Mommy did." Emily set the book aside and pulled Sophie into her lap. "Your mommy didn't want to leave," she said gently. "She loved you so much, and she didn't choose to go away." "I know," Sophie said. "Daddy told me. But she's still gone. And I'm scared you'll be gone too." Emily's heart shattered. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "I promise." "Do you promise forever?" Emily thought about all the reasons she shouldn't make that promise, all the ways it could go wrong. Then she thought about Alexander's smile, Sophie's laugh, the way she felt when she was with them, like she'd finally found the place she was supposed to be. "Yeah," Emily said, "I promise forever." Sophie hugged her tight. "Good, because I want you to be my mom." Emily's eyes flooded. Sophie, I know you're not my real mom," Sophie continued, "but you could be my bonus mom. Mia at school has a bonus mom because her parents are divorced, and you could be mine because my real mom is in heaven." Emily held Sophie close and let herself cry. "I would be honored," she whispered, "to be your bonus mom." When she tucked Sophie in and went to find Alexander, he was in his office, working late as usual. "Hey," Emily said from the doorway. He looked up, saw her expression, and immediately stood. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm moving in," Emily said. Alexander went very still. "What?" "I'm moving in," Emily repeated. "Officially, permanently, all in, just like you said." "What changed your mind?" Emily crossed the room and took his hands. "Sophie asked me to be her bonus mom," she said, her voice shaking. "And I realized I didn't just want to be with you. I wanted to be part of this family, your family, and I'm tired of being scared of good things." Alexander pulled her close and kissed her, deep and desperate and full of promise. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love you too," Emily whispered back. "Marry me." Emily pulled back, her eyes wide. "What?" "Marry me," Alexander repeated. "I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but I've already lost 5 years being afraid to feel anything. I don't want to waste another minute." Emily stared at him, her heart pounding. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane. They'd barely been together 2 months. They were still figuring each other out. But the part of her that had survived poverty and loss and threats and fear, the part that had learned the hard way that life was short and precious and unpredictable, that part knew exactly what to say. "Yes," Emily said. "Yes, I'll marry you." Alexander's face transformed with joy. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like idiots. "We're doing this," he said, setting her down. "We're really doing this." "We're really doing this," Emily confirmed. Then she remembered something. "Wait, don't you need a ring or something?" Alexander's smile turned sheepish. "About that." He pulled open his desk drawer and retrieved a small velvet box. Emily's jaw dropped. "How long have you had that?" "I bought it the day after you agreed to have dinner with me," Alexander admitted. "I know, I'm insane. But I saw it and I thought of you and I just knew." He opened the box. Inside was a ring that made Emily's breath catch. Simple, elegant. A single diamond on a platinum band. Nothing ostentatious or flashy, just beautiful. "It's perfect," Emily whispered. Alexander slipped it onto her finger, and it fit like it had been made for her. "You're perfect," he corrected softly. Emily laughed through tears. "I'm really not. I'm broke and stubborn, and I have no idea how to be part of a wealthy family. Good thing I'm not looking for perfect," Alexander said. "I'm looking for real. And you're the most real thing that's ever happened to me." They stood in his office, holding each other, the ring glinting on Emily's finger, and for the first time in her entire life, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 3 months later, on a crisp Saturday morning in early spring, Emily Carter married Alexander Hayes in a small ceremony in Central Park. Jake flew in from Ohio and cried through the whole thing. Marcus served as best man and gave a speech about second chances that left everyone emotional. Sophie was the flower girl and took her job so seriously that she lectured another kid about proper petal distribution. Michelle and a few close friends from Hayes Global attended. Catherine's parents came too, and Emily watched Alexander embrace them with tears in his eyes, finally able to share his happiness without guilt. There were no magazine photographers, no society page coverage, just the people who mattered most, bearing witness to two broken people choosing to build something whole. When the officiant pronounced them married, Alexander kissed Emily like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Sophie cheered louder than anyone. At the small reception afterward, Jake pulled Emily aside. "I'm proud of you," he said, hugging her tight. "Mom would be too." Emily's eyes burned. "You think so?" "I know so," Jake said firmly. "She always wanted you to be happy. And Em, you're glowing. I've never seen you like this." Emily glanced across the room where Alexander was holding Sophie, both of them laughing at something Marcus had said. "I never thought I could have this," she admitted. "A family, security, someone who looks at me like I'm worth everything." "You were always worth everything," Jake said. "You just needed someone who could see it." The reception was small and perfect, and ended early because Sophie had a horse show the next day that she refused to miss. That night, Emily and Alexander stood on the balcony of their penthouse, their home now, not just his, looking out at the city that had brought them together. "I have something for you," Alexander said. Emily turned. "You already gave me a ring and a wedding and a family. What else could you possibly—" Alexander handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, made out to Jake Carter, for the full amount of his remaining tuition and living expenses. Emily's throat closed. "Alexander, I can't—" "You're not," he interrupted gently. "I am, because Jake is family now, and family takes care of each other. He shouldn't have to worry about money when he's trying to get his degree." Emily's vision blurred with tears. "Also," Alexander continued, pulling out another document, "I talked to the board at Hayes Global. We're creating a new position, Chief of Community Investment. It's yours if you want it. Same salary as the other C-suite executives. Your job would be to identify organizations and causes worth supporting, to make sure Hayes Global is actually doing good in the world, not just making money." Emily stared at him. "You created an entire position for me?" "I created a position the company should have had all along," Alexander corrected. "But yes, I want you to have it, because you understand what it means to struggle, what people actually need, and I trust you to use our resources wisely." Emily launched herself into his arms, kissing him hard. "I love you," she said fiercely. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Alexander whispered. "Thank you for taking a chance on me, on us." "Thank you for seeing me," Emily said. "Really seeing me. Not just the assistant trying to survive, but the person underneath." They stood wrapped around each other as the city lights sparkled below, two people who'd learned the hard way that survival wasn't enough, that life required risk and trust and the terrifying leap into the unknown. Inside, Sophie was already asleep, dreaming of horses and her bonus mom who'd promised forever. And in a small apartment in Ohio, Jake opened his laptop to find an email notification about a full scholarship fund established in his mother's name. Emily Carter Hayes had spent 30 years learning how to survive. But standing on that balcony in Alexander's arms, her husband now, her partner, her choice, she finally understood what it meant to truly live. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but fully and completely and with every messy, complicated, beautiful piece of her heart. The photograph that had started everything, that accidental moment of vulnerability, had cracked through the walls they'd both built. And what they'd built in its place was stronger than either of them could have imagined. A family born from chaos. Love born from fear. Hope born from the ashes of everything they'd lost. It wasn't the fairy tale Emily had stopped believing in as a child. It was better. It was real. And 3 years later, when Emily stood in a hospital room holding a newborn daughter, while Alexander and Sophie crowded around in wonder, she finally understood what her mother had tried to tell her all those years ago. That life breaks everyone, but some people become strong in the broken places. That survival is necessary, But living is the goal. That love, real love, isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other every single day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Emily looked at her husband, her stepdaughter, her new baby girl, and felt the weight of everything she'd survived shift into something lighter. Gratitude. She'd sent that photograph by accident on a cold Monday night when her life was falling apart. And it had changed everything. Not because the photograph itself was magical, but because it had been real, vulnerable, human. And sometimes being human, messy and imperfect and scared, was exactly what the world needed. Emily Carter had learned to survive poverty and loss and threats and fear. But Emily Hayes had learned something even more important. She'd learned to live. And in the end, that made all the difference.